I spent months planning that party. Not weeks. Months. Every detail, from the venue to the catering to the playlist, I handled personally. I took time off work, postponed a major back-end deployment at the company, even canceled a short vacation to make sure everything would be flawless for Mom and Dad's 30th anniversary. It was supposed to be a tribute. Thank you for everything they'd done for me and my sister. A chance to show them that despite our differences over the years, we were a family and I still cared enough to make something beautiful for them. The hotel was incredible. This stunning boutique place overlooking the water in Laguna Beach. It cost me a small fortune, but I didn't care. I booked the sunset ballroom with the floor-to-ceiling windows, arranged custom decorations, and even managed to get that local jazz band my dad used to love back in the day. Every guest had a personalized place card. There were framed photos from every era of their marriage. Polaroids from the early days, digital prints from when Brooklyn and I were kids, some taken last year at Thanksgiving. I even recreated a version of their original wedding cake based on a grainy old photo my aunt had stashed away. The guests had started arriving. I stood by the entrance in a navy blue dress I picked just for the evening, greeting people with a smile and a nervous flutter in my chest. I kept checking the time. Mom and Dad were supposed to arrive at 6:45 sharp. By 7 o'clock I was starting to worry, and then finally, I saw them. They walked in looking like they'd stepped out of some magazine spread. My dad in a sharp gray suit, Mom in a sleek silver dress that made her look 10 years younger. And right behind them was Brooklyn. She looked radiant, of course. My little sister always had that glow about her, the kind that made people pause mid-sentence. Long auburn hair in soft waves, pale pink lipstick, not a single line out of place on her pastel jumpsuit. She wasn't supposed to be there early. She told me she had a client meeting and would arrive around 8. I'd even arranged for a special toast for when she walked in. So I was surprised but not upset, yet. I took a step toward Mom with this huge grin on my face, arms half outstretched, ready to hug her, welcome her, show her everything I'd done for them. But then she looked me dead in the eye, her expression cool and unreadable, and said those 6 words I'll never forget. "What are you doing here, Madison?" For a second I thought she was joking. Actually laughed. I thought maybe she was teasing me in that dry way she sometimes did when I was a kid, trying to throw me off guard. But her face didn't change. Her tone didn't change. It just got colder. "You weren't invited," she added. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. Literally froze. I could feel people around us go quiet, or maybe that was just the blood draining from my face. Felt like the world stopped for a moment. I looked over at Brooklyn, hoping for some kind of explanation, some joke, some lightness to take the edge off what had just happened. She didn't say a word. Just stood there beside them, arms folded, with this smug, barely there smile on her lips. The kind of look someone gives when they've pulled something off and are waiting to see how long it'll take you to realize it. I stammered something, I can't even remember what. Something like, I threw this party. Or, I invited everyone. But my voice sounded foreign to me, thin and shaky. Dad didn't say anything. He just looked uncomfortable. His eyes darted between me and Mom like he wasn't sure what side he was supposed to take. He glanced at the floor. That hurt more than I expected. A few guests nearby were starting to look over. I felt the sting of embarrassment crawling up my neck, flushing my face. I tried to tell myself not to cry, not in front of everyone, not here. I turned to the event coordinator and mumbled something about stepping out for air. I walked out to the hotel terrace. The ocean looked beautiful under the soft golden lights, but I couldn't take it in. My head was spinning. I kept replaying her words over and over. "What are you doing here? You weren't invited. You shouldn't be here. The party I planned. The one I paid for. The one where I'd triple confirmed every guest list and seating chart. Somehow, in some twisted way, I'd been made into the intruder. I stayed out there for 20 minutes. No one came to check on me. Not my sister. Not my mom. Not even my dad. When I finally walked back in, I saw Brooklyn holding court near the bar, laughing with a group of people who used to babysit us as kids. My mom was dancing with one of her cousins. It was like I'd disappeared, like I'd never even been there. Eventually, the hotel staff started asking who they should talk to about the final details. Payment, cleanup, the band's extra hour. I handled everything. Signed every form. Tipped every staff member. Then I left. No one stopped me. No one even noticed. Looking back now, it's almost laughable how long I let it go on. I used to think it was normal what families did for each other. I told myself that helping out financially was just part of being the responsible daughter, the one who had made it. I had a good job, after all. Back-end development at a solid tech firm, great benefits, remote flexibility, and a salary that had just passed $130,000 the year before. I didn't come from money, and I knew how tight things had been for my parents growing up. So when they called and said the roof had started leaking during a spring storm and they couldn't afford the repairs, I wired $18,500 without thinking twice. When Dad was diagnosed with high blood pressure and needed medication, and then Mom needed dental work that insurance wouldn't fully cover, it was another couple thousand out of my pocket. It wasn't a one-time thing. It became a pattern. Every time something broke, every time a bill showed up they couldn't handle, it landed in my lap. At first it was subtle. Sweetie, I hate to ask, but, and we'll pay you back when things settle. They never paid me back, not once. After a while they didn't even bother pretending. It just became understood that if anything came up, Madison would take care of it. I never complained. I thought that's what being a grown-up meant, shouldering more responsibility. They'd worked hard raising me in Brooklyn and I convinced myself I was just giving back. That's how I justified it when I paid off the last $6,000 on their credit card so they wouldn't lose the house. Or when I covered the property taxes 1 year after they forgot to set money aside. I told myself it was no big deal. I could afford it. I had the means. What made it worse, what slowly started eating away at me, was watching how differently they treated Brooklyn. My younger sister, the golden child, the family's little darling. She had always been the center of attention. Even when we were kids she could do no wrong. If she brought home a B-, it was she tried her best. If I brought home an A-, it was, why not an A? That dynamic never changed. Brooklyn grew up knowing she didn't have to work for anything. She dropped out of college halfway through her sophomore year because it didn't feel authentic. Then she bounced around a few jobs, waitressing, dog walking, content consulting, before deciding she was going to be a full-time influencer. At first I thought it was a phase. She started an Instagram account where she posted photos of herself in coffee shops, next to random murals, sometimes in yoga pants holding green smoothies. Within a year she had over 50,000 followers. She would brag about brand deals like she was raking in cash, but somehow never had enough to pay her phone bill on time. She lived rent-free at our parents' place until she was 28, then moved into a tiny studio apartment downtown that I later found out I was unknowingly helping pay for, through monthly transfers for groceries that Mom insisted she needed. No one ever said thank you. Not once. If I brought it up even gently I was made to feel selfish. You're the one with the good job, Mom would say. Brooklyn's trying to build something. It's harder now for young people. Except Brooklyn wasn't struggling. She was flying to Palm Springs for brand collabs, going on content trips, to Tulum, getting her nails done twice a week, posting photos of brunches that probably cost more than what I spent on groceries in a week. And yet they adored her. She walked into a room and the energy shifted. My parents lit up around her. They called her our free spirit, our creative soul. Me. I was the one they called when the fridge broke or the car needed new tires. I was the one expected to drop everything and send a wire transfer or Venmo, no questions asked. The resentment didn't come all at once. It built slowly over years. At first it was just a small ache, something I swallowed with a forced smile. Then it became a gnawing sense of being used, of being reduced to a wallet. I remember one night I was on a Zoom call with my manager prepping for a product launch when Mom called 5 times in a row. I finally picked up, thinking it was an emergency, and she asked me if I could just cover the down payment for new living room furniture because Brooklyn had found a perfect set on sale and they didn't want to miss the deal. When I hesitated, Mom said, "Don't be like that, Madison." Don't be like what? Like someone tired of being bled dry? But I didn't say that. I never did. I just nodded and told her I'd see what I could do. It got to the point where I started dreading their phone calls. My heart would sink every time I saw their number on the screen. I knew it would be another request, another bill, another thing they couldn't afford but expected me to cover without complaint. What hurt the most wasn't the money. It was the way they saw me, not as a daughter, not even as a person, but as a resource. A backup plan. A safety net they didn't respect, just relied on. Meanwhile, Brooklyn got love, praise, attention. She could screw up endlessly and they'd defend her. She was the favorite. I was the financier. It started with a single phone call when I was 25. Dad had maxed out 2 credit cards and was behind on payments. The interest rates had ballooned and he was getting calls from debt collectors. He sounded embarrassed at first, tired, ashamed, but still somehow certain I'd help. "It's just temporary," he said. 12 grand, Madison. That's nothing compared to what you make, right? I was fresh into my new job at the time, maybe 2 years into my career, just beginning to build some stability. I had student loans of my own, rent on a small but decent apartment in Round Rock, and I just started putting money away for retirement. But I wanted to be a good daughter. I didn't want him to feel humiliated, and I thought maybe foolishly that if I bailed him out once, it would fix the pattern. I transferred the $12,000 in 3 separate payments. He never brought it up again and he certainly never offered to pay it back. By the time I turned 30, the requests had multiplied. First it was Dad's credit cards, Then mom's medical bills after she had a minor heart episode that required ongoing testing and medications. Insurance only covered part of it and every leftover balance came straight to me. Then Brooklyn's expenses started slipping in as if they'd always been my responsibility. Her phone bill, $89 a month, landed in my inbox with a forwarded note from mom saying, "Can you just handle this? She's focusing on a campaign right now." That campaign, I later found out, was a week-long series of yoga poses on the beach with a sponsorship from a smoothie brand that paid in gift cards. I covered the electricity bill. I paid for the internet. When the washing machine broke, I paid for the replacement and the installation. When the water heater failed midwinter, I took care of that too. Some months I was paying more into their household than I spent on my own. The scariest part is that I didn't even notice when it stopped being temporary. My help became the expectation, not the exception. I remember one particular moment that still plays in my head. I was on a video call with Brooklyn, one of those rare times she actually answered, and I asked as gently as I could if she'd consider at least covering her own phone bill going forward. I framed it carefully. I wasn't angry. I just wanted to set a boundary. She blinked at me like I'd asked her to pay off the national debt. "Come on, Maddie," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're the brainy one. You're the one with the stable job. I'm trying to build something creative. Not all of us were meant for code and keyboards." I sat there, stunned, her words sinking in. Not all of us were meant for code and keyboards. Like what I did didn't matter. Like it was this gray, dull existence, useful only for paying other people's bills. I never forgot that conversation. It was like she couldn't fathom that I had my own needs, my own goals. My career wasn't this random miracle I stumbled into. I worked for it. I went to college while working part-time jobs, graduated top of my class, and stayed late to debug broken features for months before I earned my first promotion. None of that mattered to her, or to my parents. They didn't see effort. They only saw outcome, my salary, and used it as a justification for why I should take care of everything. Anytime I brought it up even slightly, I'd be met with sarcasm. "You're smart," Mom once said flatly when I hesitated on sending another $300 for lawn maintenance. "You'll figure it out." When I suggested that maybe Brooklyn could contribute something, anything, I got, "Don't be petty, Madison. She's not wired like you." It was like my intelligence had become a curse. A label they used to dump everything on me. I was the responsible one, so I had to pay. I was the smart one, so I had to solve. I was the stable one, so I couldn't complain. Meanwhile, Brooklyn's chaos was somehow viewed as artistry. Her inability to budget or follow through on anything. That was her being free-spirited. Her habit of ghosting on commitments, flaking on family events, or forgetting birthdays. That was just Brooklyn being Brooklyn. It got so normalized that they stopped even asking. Money would just be assumed. Mom would text me vague things like, "Handled the cable bill already, right?" Or, "Car's due for registration. Figured you'd get to that." No please. No thank you. Just assumptions stacked on top of assumptions. My bank account became their shared resource and I started living like someone on a much lower income just to keep up with their needs. The worst part was how casual they were about it. They treated my money as if it had no source, like it just flowed freely from somewhere and replenished itself overnight. Once, I mentioned during dinner that I had cut back on some personal expenses because I was trying to save for a down payment. My dad laughed and said, "Save? Why, you're always going to make more." Brooklyn chimed in with a smirk. "Yeah, and besides, we'll probably just end up in your guest room when we're old anyway." They thought it was funny. I did not. But I didn't argue. I just smiled tightly and stared at the mashed potatoes on my plate, wondering when exactly I had stopped being a daughter and started being a service provider. The idea for the anniversary party didn't even start with me. It was Mom's. She mentioned it offhandedly during a phone call in late March, saying something like, "It's been 30 years. That's something worth celebrating, don't you think?" I remember nodding along, already picturing something small but elegant. A cozy dinner with close family and friends, maybe something at a nice restaurant, or a backyard setup with string lights and catered food. Nothing extravagant, just meaningful. But then Brooklyn got involved. The moment she heard the word anniversary, she lit up like she'd just discovered a new business venture. "Oh my God," she said, "we should go big. I'm talking full-blown Laguna Beach, private venue, string quartet, customized cocktails, the whole thing. Think Pinterest meets Vogue. It could be epic." I should have known then how it would go. Because the second Brooklyn gets excited about an idea, she acts like she owns it. Within a week, she'd made herself the creative director of the entire thing. She sent me a mood board with floral installations, signature drink menus, sample palettes in blush and gold, a full outline of the event flow, down to which music should play when our parents walked in. She told me she wanted fresh rose petals on the ceiling and a moment when confetti would fall during the toast. I should have laughed. I should have said no. But I didn't. Because by that point I'd already been conditioned. Every big family gesture somehow landed on me. Brooklyn came up with the ideas, Mom gushed over them, and I quietly figured out how to fund it all. This time was no different. Except it was the most expensive yet. The venue was her idea. A boutique hotel in Laguna Beach that hosted celebrity weddings and high-end fundraisers. I called to inquire and nearly choked when they quoted $8,000 for the ballroom alone. Brooklyn insisted it was worth it. The lighting is perfect there, she said, and I know exactly how to style it. I put down a $5,000 deposit the same week. Then came the band. Not just any band, but a live jazz quartet that specialized in vintage Sinatra-style covers. She said Dad would love it, and maybe he would've if he'd even acknowledged it. The quartet cost $3,400, including sound setup and travel fees. Then came the florist, who charged $2,100 just for the ceiling installation with the rose petals, plus another $1,800 for the rest of the floral decor, centerpieces, and entrance arch. Brooklyn emailed the florist directly with what she wanted, then just CC'd me for the invoice. No warning. No discussion. Every vendor she contacted sent me the bills. She never once asked how I was doing financially. Never offered to contribute. She just assumed I'd take care of it like always. Even when I hesitated, when I called her to ask if we could scale back on a few things, she brushed it off with that breezy tone of hers. Come on, Maddie. You know this stuff matters to Mom. It has to be perfect. There was the custom cake. $1,200. The photographer. $2,300. A signature scent diffused through the venue. Yes, she actually wanted the place to smell like peonies and white musk. $350. Every time she added something, she made it sound like I should be grateful for her vision. Like I was lucky she was putting this much thought into it. And somehow I believed it. The guest list kept growing too. What was supposed to be a small, intimate gathering of 30 ballooned into 72 people, including distant cousins I hadn't seen since childhood and some people Brooklyn invited for the vibe. I booked a catering package for $75, priced per head. That came to $6,150. The total in the end was over $21,000. And Brooklyn? She didn't pay a cent. She didn't even pretend to. There wasn't a single moment where she said, "Let me cover this one," or, "I'll pitch in." Nothing. She waltzed through the planning process like a showrunner, tossing out grand ideas and design choices, while I was the production assistant behind the curtain making sure everything got paid for, set up and confirmed. When I mentioned the cost to Mom, casually, carefully, she barely reacted. "You're good with money," she said. "You'll make it back. It's not a big deal for someone like you. Someone like me." That phrase stayed with me. Like my hard work, my savings, my sacrifices made me some kind of machine that didn't feel stress or pressure. Like being financially responsible meant I had no right to draw a line. Brooklyn was the visionary. I was the funding. That was the unspoken rule. And the most infuriating part? Everyone praised her. After the event started, I stood in the corner, listening to our aunts gush over the decor, the music, the flowers. "Brooklyn really outdid herself," one of them said. "This is just stunning. So thoughtful." Another nodded and said, "She has such an eye for these things." No one mentioned the invoices. The bookings. The deposits. No one looked at me. And when Mom finally walked in, dressed in silver with Dad on her arm and Brooklyn right beside her, she looked around the ballroom, took it all in and said, "It's beautiful. I'm glad Brooklyn made it happen." I was standing 5 feet away. And not a single person corrected her. The account was supposed to be temporary. Just a stopgap solution. A joint family savings account we opened 2 years ago when the roof first started leaking. It was Dad's idea actually. He said it would be easier if we kept the funds in one place so that when contractors sent their quotes or requested down payments, he could just handle it directly. At the time I thought it made sense. I had wired $20,000 into the account, which should have more than covered everything they described to me. Roof repairs, insulation, possibly replacing the old gutter system. The estimate had come in at just under $18,000. The rest was padding just in case. I didn't think about the account again for a long time. My schedule was chaos then, packed with deployment windows and a major rollout that was months overdue. I trusted them. I didn't monitor it closely because frankly I didn't think I had to. Then one day I was on the phone with my bank about something entirely unrelated, a small discrepancy with my personal account, and the woman on the line asked if I still wanted notifications for the family joint account to go to my old email. I paused. I hadn't received notifications from that account in over a year. I'd assumed Dad was managing it. Curious, I logged into the portal to check the balance. What I saw didn't make sense. The balance was $4,300. My stomach dropped. I refreshed the screen thinking it was a glitch. It wasn't. There were pages of transactions, some small, others shockingly large, all dated within the last 9 months. I clicked through them one by one. There were charges from a boutique fashion retailer in Los Angeles, $678. Then a payment to a travel agency for a romantic getaway package in Clearwater Beach, Florida, $200. A monthly car subscription service that billed at $890 per month. And dozens of smaller transactions. Sephora, Airbnb deposits, upscale dining. Some of them were from stores I knew Brooklyn shopped at. One was even a charge from a spa she'd posted about in her Instagram story a few weeks earlier, captioned with something like, "Self-care days are sacred." I called the bank immediately. I kept my voice calm at least at first, but my hands were shaking. I told them I was one of the account holders and asked who was linked to the debit card making those purchases. The woman on the line was polite but firm. "That card is assigned to Brooklyn Carter." I didn't speak for a moment. Then I asked if there were any other cards issued. She said only 2 were active. One under my name which had never been used and one under Brooklyn's which had been used heavily over the past year. I asked if notifications for the card activity had been going out. She confirmed they had, email and SMS, to the original phone number and email addresses on the account. Both my parents' contact information. Both still active. That was when I realized. They knew. Not just Brooklyn. Not just her reckless spending. My parents had known the whole time. Every time she drained more money from that account, they'd received the same alerts I would have received if I'd thought to update my email settings. They knew and they said nothing. Not a warning. Not a heads up. Not a single word. I sat at my desk in silence after the call ended, staring at the spreadsheet I'd been working on for hours, trying to pretend this wasn't happening. My mind kept circling the same thought. Why? Why would they let her do this? Why would they let her take what was meant for their home for their safety and use it on vacations, clothes and luxury expenses? And how long would it have gone on if I hadn't stumbled on it? The next day I called Dad. I didn't want to. I had to force myself to. My voice was tight, my throat dry. I asked him directly, had he seen the charges? Did he know Brooklyn was using the money? There was a long pause on the line. Then he said, "It's not what you think." But it was. It was exactly what I thought. I asked him if he ever told her to stop. If he tried to move the money or revoke the card or do anything at all to prevent it. He sighed like he was exhausted from the burden of dealing with my questions. Then he said something I'll never forget. "She needed help, Madison. She was going through a rough patch." A rough patch. She'd stolen over $15,000. Not borrowed, stolen. Money that was earmarked for something specific. Something essential. And it wasn't just that she did it. It was that they allowed it. They watched it happen in real time and decided it was easier to let her keep going than to say no. When I confronted Brooklyn, she didn't even flinch. She shrugged, said something like, "You make enough." I didn't think it'd be a big deal. No apology. No guilt. Just that same entitled indifference she always had when someone else picked up the tab for her decisions. That moment shattered something in me I didn't even realize was still intact. Whatever trust I'd held on to, whatever hope that deep down we were still a family that respected one another, disintegrated. They didn't just take my money. They took my faith in them. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever get it back. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind of gray, unassuming day where nothing is supposed to happen. I was already halfway through a client sprint, my desk covered in notes and login tokens, when I got a text from Lena Hoffman. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. We'd been close once, back in college and a few years after, before she drifted more into Brooklyn's orbit. Eventually she stopped reaching out and I never asked why. But that day she messaged me out of the blue. "Can we talk? It's about Brooklyn. Please. It's important." I stared at the screen for a long minute, debating whether to reply. The wounds were still raw from what I'd uncovered on the joint account. I hadn't told anyone outside the family yet. I hadn't even processed all of it myself. But something about Lena's message felt urgent. I told her I could meet in an hour. We met at a quiet cafe near downtown Austin. It was the kind of place with exposed brick walls, warm lighting and too many plants in mismatched ceramic pots. Lena was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner table with a worn leather bag at her feet. She looked tired, older than I remembered, her expression guarded but not cold. She didn't waste time. "I'm sorry I haven't talked to you," she said as soon as I sat down. "I should have come to you earlier. But I didn't know how to, until I saw what she was doing. I didn't even need to ask who she was." Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder, thick and slightly bent at the corners. She slid it across the table to me, then leaned back with this weight in her shoulders like she was finally unloading something she'd been carrying too long. Inside the folder was everything. Printouts of text messages between her and Brooklyn, screenshots that showed Brooklyn bragging about the money she borrowed, mocking me for not even noticing, and joking about how easy it had been to convince Mom and Dad to stay quiet. There were receipts from the clothing boutiques, annotated with her own handwriting, pointing out that the timing matched the withdrawals from the family account. Screenshots of her Instagram stories posted the same days as the charges. She even included the invoice from the Florida trip, where Brooklyn had listed my name as the emergency contact for the booking without my consent. And then there were the bank statements. They were exact copies of the same ones I'd seen through my login. Only these had been forwarded to Lena by Brooklyn herself months ago, during what looked like a lapse in judgment or some twisted effort to impress her. Brooklyn had emailed Lena a PDF labeled, "Proof I can manage my own life," followed by a laughing emoji. In the thread she boasted about finding a workaround, and how Madison never checks this stuff anyway. The total amount taken was $15,000. Lena had highlighted each withdrawal in yellow, cross-referenced with either receipts, screenshots, or public social posts. She had even added handwritten notes connecting each event to its source, carefully documenting it like a criminal case file. The level of detail was staggering. I read in silence. The cafe around me faded. My hands trembled as I turned the last page. I don't know what hurt more, the confirmation that my sister had been so deliberate in her theft, or the absolute glee she seemed to take in getting away with it. And the way she talked about me in those messages, dismissive, smug, like I was some clueless idiot floating above her schemes, it knocked the air out of my lungs. Lena watched me carefully. "I confronted her after she sent that," she said quietly. She laughed. "Said it wasn't a big deal because you'd survive." That's when I stopped talking to her. I couldn't be part of it. I nodded, too numb to speak. It was worse than I'd imagined, and I had already imagined the worst. What followed next cemented everything. I called my parents that evening. I told them I'd seen the proof. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply told them that I knew, about the money, the texts, the receipts, all of it. There was a long pause. Then Mom said, in the most infuriatingly calm tone I've ever heard from her, "We didn't want to say anything because it would have caused unnecessary tension. And we were so close to the anniversary." I asked her if she understood that it was theft. That Brooklyn had stolen from me not just casually but systematically with their full knowledge. Her reply: "Don't ruin the atmosphere before the celebration. We just want peace." Peace. They wanted peace. As if their silence, their complicity, their approval of what she'd done wasn't already a war against me. As if I was the one bringing destruction simply by acknowledging the truth. Dad didn't speak at all during the call. I could hear him in the background, his breath on the line, but he never said a word. That silence cut deeper than any lie. The ballroom was already filling up when I arrived. Nearly 100 guests, dressed to impress, weaving between high tables and low candlelight. A saxophone floated above the low hum of chatter, warm and elegant. The entire room smelled faintly of garden roses and champagne. It was beautiful. Perfect even. Exactly how Brooklyn wanted it. But I wasn't walking in to admire the decor. I wasn't there to smile politely or fake small talk with distant relatives. I was there because someone had to finally say the truth. I spotted Mom and Dad near the far end of the room, standing just beneath the arched floral entrance that I'd paid for. Brooklyn was close beside them, radiant in a floor-length ivory dress, her makeup flawless, sipping from a crystal flute like she was royalty. Her smile faltered the moment she saw me. Dad looked away. Mom stepped forward, her expression sharper than I'd ever seen it. "You're creating problems," she hissed, low enough that no one else could hear but firm enough to stab right through me. "We asked you not to come. Just go home." For a moment I said nothing. I stood there in the dress I'd bought 3 weeks earlier for this exact evening, gripping my small black clutch like a lifeline, and I felt the weight of every lie, every insult, every dollar they took from me as if it were stacked on my back. I almost left. Not because I believed her but because I was exhausted. But then I remembered Lena's voice from the day before, the folder in my hand, and the way Brooklyn had laughed about how I'd survive. Oh, not tonight. I didn't say a word to Mom. I simply stepped aside and texted Lena. She walked in 5 minutes later, right on cue, in a plain dark blazer and holding the same folder she'd shown me at the cafe. Her presence caused a stir immediately. Some guests turned toward her as she walked across the room. Brooklyn noticed her too. Her face drained of color in a flash. Lena didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the bandstand at the edge of the dance floor, turned toward the microphone next to the quartet stand, and took it in her hand before anyone could stop her. The music stopped. A few people laughed nervously, thinking it was part of the program. But then Lena's voice came through the speakers, clear, direct, unwavering. "Sorry to interrupt," she began. "I know most of you don't know me, but my name is Lena Hoffman. I used to be close with Brooklyn. And I'm here tonight because I think you all deserve to know who paid for this evening. A ripple moved through the room. The laughter died. This beautiful party, she continued, flipping open the folder. This venue, the music, the food, the flowers, the customized cocktails, the photography, it was not arranged by Brooklyn. And it was not a gift from loving parents. It was paid for almost entirely by Madison Carter. Her sister. People turned to look at me. Whispers spread like fire. Lena started reading off the list. She named vendors, exact charges, dates. She held up receipts, bank statements, screenshots of text messages. She even described the Florida vacation and the stolen funds from the joint account. Every detail matched. It was methodical, indisputable, and deeply humiliating for them. When she mentioned the $15,000 Brooklyn had taken from the family roof fund, a few audible gasps erupted from the crowd. I saw Aunt Meredith cover her mouth. One of Dad's old co-workers leaned forward, shaking his head. Brooklyn tried to cut in then. She marched toward Lena, voice raised, smile gone, shouting over the mic, "This is insane. She's making things up. Madison's bitter and dragging us into her drama." But Lena was calm. She pulled out the printed email Brooklyn had sent months earlier, the one with the bank statements and the caption, "Proof I can manage my own life." She read it aloud. Loud enough that no one in the room could pretend not to hear. I watched Brooklyn stop mid-step. She froze, then turned toward our parents, silently pleading. But they didn't come to her defense. Dad looked stunned. Mom's jaw was clenched so tight I thought she might break her own teeth. It was too late. The room had already turned. Some guests began quietly leaving. Others simply stood still, unsure what to do. The spell of the evening was broken and there was no salvaging it. The beautiful lighting, the soft music, the clinking of glasses. None of it mattered anymore. Me. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply stood in the same spot, surrounded by strangers and relatives, knowing that for the first time in years, I hadn't been the one carrying the weight of someone else's lies. I finally let them hold it. As soon as Lena stepped away from the microphone, the room was no longer a celebration. It was an open wound. The silence after her final words wasn't relief. It was shock, the kind that fills a space like cold water rushing in. People weren't whispering anymore. They were watching. Watching me, watching Brooklyn, watching my parents, trying to understand how something so polished had cracked so quickly and so completely. Brooklyn had gone pale, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. My mother stood stiff, still too proud to look at anyone but me, her eyes filled not with guilt but with fury. And my father. He had the face of a man who'd finally seen his reflection after years of refusing to look in the mirror. I turned and walked toward the hotel's reception desk without a word. Every step I took felt like I was finally walking out from under something I had been carrying for far too long. The event coordinator looked up from her tablet, smiling hesitantly until she saw my expression. "I need to speak to the general manager," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Now." A few minutes later, in the back office behind the ballroom, I sat across from the manager who had helped coordinate every single detail of the party. A woman named Fiona, efficient and composed, who remembered my name before I said it and addressed me like someone who knew things were about to change. I explained the situation. Not everything, but enough. "This event was paid for on my card," I said, placing my phone on the desk and opening the banking app. "I'm the contracting party. These people excluded me from my own event, used funds dishonestly, and I'm no longer authorizing the payment. I want the transaction for the outstanding $15,000 canceled. Immediately." She didn't blink. Maybe she'd seen worse. Or maybe she hadn't, and this was just the first time someone like me had finally said no. She nodded. "Understood. We'll issue the cancellation and stop services." I signed a digital form. It took less than 5 minutes. By the time I stepped back into the ballroom, the music had stopped completely. The quartet was quietly packing up their instruments. One of the catering staff signaled the rest of the team, and within seconds, the waiters began collecting untouched plates from the tables. The bar staff capped their bottles and wheeled the carts out. Even the lighting dimmed slightly as the staff adjusted the settings back to the default mode. It was like someone had hit the undo button on the entire event. Gasps rippled through the room as people began realizing what was happening. One woman tried to stop a waiter carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres, asking if food was still being served. He shook his head. The party was over. Phones came out. Guests started filming. Not just the event staff leaving, but Brooklyn's frantic attempts to talk to someone, anyone, who could reverse what was happening. She was half crying, half shouting at Fiona, demanding that the service continue, waving her hands in the air, claiming it was all a mistake. But no one listened. Because the one who paid had spoken. My mother stormed up to me, her voice raised, eyes blazing with something between disbelief and rage. "You're ruining our anniversary," she shouted loud enough for the entire room to hear. "This is our night. What is wrong with you?" I looked at her. And for the first time in my life I didn't flinch. "I already paid," I said, my voice calm cold. "I planned it. I funded it. And you threw me out like I was nothing. So celebrate it yourselves. You wanted me gone? You got it." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. And maybe she didn't. Maybe for the first time she was seeing the daughter who had spent 10 years funding their lives without acknowledgement, who had been betrayed, stolen from, lied to, and had finally reached her limit. I walked out through the front entrance without another word, the echo of my heels tapping against the marble floor, as behind me the guests stood stunned, some still filming, others frozen mid-conversation. It was no longer my party. And it was no longer my family. The first video went up less than 12 hours after the party ended. Someone had filmed Lena at the microphone, reading aloud the breakdown of how Brooklyn stole the money, and posted it to TikTok with a caption like, "Influencer caught stealing from her own sister," at her parents' anniversary party. Started getting traction overnight. I woke up the next morning with my phone vibrating nonstop. Notifications from people I hadn't heard from in years, texts, DMs, screenshots of the video going viral. By lunch it was everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram Reels. My sister's name was trending locally then regionally. People dug up her old content, cross-referenced her vacation posts with the bank statement dates Lena had read aloud. Someone even made a side-by-side video matching the Florida trip footage to the $2,200 charge on the family account. Comment sections exploded with people calling her a thief, a fraud, a scammer. They weren't subtle. They weren't polite. The curated image she'd spent years crafting, carefree, aesthetic, authentic, collapsed in real time. Her follower count started plummeting by the hour. I watched it drop like a slow leak at first, then a full rupture. 40,000. 33. 26. The last time I checked it was below 10. She tried to do damage control, of course. Posted a Notes app apology with vague phrases like miscommunication and financial misunderstanding. Said she was being targeted by someone close to the family with a personal grudge. But it didn't work. People had seen too much. They didn't believe her, and worse, they didn't forget. Within days, 3 brands dropped her. One posted a statement explicitly saying they didn't tolerate unethical conduct and were ending their partnership effective immediately. Her email for collab inquiries was deactivated by the end of the week. The wellness retreat she was supposed to co-host in Arizona quietly removed her name from the website. She went from posting twice a day to radio silence. Meanwhile, I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't post. I didn't give interviews. I didn't answer questions from people reaching out to get the real story. I stayed quiet not because I owed her that, but because the truth was already out there. I didn't need my help anymore. A few days after the fallout started, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first. When I answered, it was my father's voice. He didn't start with a hello. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they had allowed to happen. Just, "You need to fix this, Madison. Fix this." I asked him what exactly he expected me to do. "You know people in tech. You understand the internet. You have to help her get ahead of it before it gets worse." Then my mother got on the line. "She's being dragged through the mud," she said, her voice cold but tight with urgency. "We're not asking you to lie. Just tell people it's been handled. That you forgave her. People will move on if you say something. Forgive her. The same person who stole from me, who laughed about it, who stood next to them while they told me to leave my own event. The same people who let it happen, then told me not to ruin the atmosphere. Now they wanted my help?" I said nothing. Not one word. I held the phone to my ear for a moment longer, listening to them breathe, waiting to see if they'd finally, at long last, realize what they were asking. They didn't. So I ended the call. No yelling. No parting shot. No dramatic send-off. Just a click. Then silence. The final step wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was quiet, deliberate, and entirely mine. The Monday after that last phone call, I drove to my bank in person. I didn't want to handle it online. I wanted to feel it physically, the weight of every form I signed, every signature that officially untied me from the people who had treated me like a permanent emergency fund. I sat down with a branch manager and asked to close all joint accounts, remove my name from any secondary cards, and block any remaining auto payments tied to my information. There weren't many left. They'd already drained most of it, but it was the principle. I didn't want even a cent of mine tangled in their mess ever again. The manager didn't ask many questions. She printed out a stack of forms and I signed them one by one. With each stroke of the pen I felt a little more air in my lungs. That same day I canceled the shared cell phone plan I'd been quietly paying for since Brooklyn was 21. I terminated the monthly grocery delivery I'd set up for my parents back when they said they couldn't drive as much. I went into my accounts and combed through every recurring payment, every wire transfer, every family favor I had been covering. And I ended all of them. It took less than 2 hours. What took longer was reaching out to a therapist. I'd been putting it off for years, telling myself I didn't need it, that it wasn't that bad, that I was just tired. But the truth was I'd been exhausted for a long time, drained in ways I didn't fully understand until I started talking. The first session was hard. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there with my hands clenched in my lap, trying to explain how I had spent a decade being useful but never valued. My therapist didn't rush me. He just listened. And for once, someone listened without needing anything in return. Around the same time, Brooklyn received formal notice from my attorney. We weren't suing for the entire stolen amount. I didn't want a drawn-out war. But we did pursue a civil claim for the $10,000 she'd taken after the original roof deposit. There was no dispute. She didn't even try to fight it. The bank statements and Lena's documentation made it undeniable. She settled quietly with funds that likely came from selling off her designer bags and whatever brand payouts she still had left. Her lawyer tried to add a clause asking that I not speak publicly about the matter. I refused. There was no NDA. She didn't get to buy silence this time. The fallout hit my parents harder than I expected. Once the videos had circulated through local groups, their social circle collapsed almost overnight. They stopped getting invited to barbecues. Church friends no longer answered their calls. Dad's old colleagues distanced themselves. Even the neighbor who used to bring them pies on holidays stopped knocking. It was as if the community had finally seen what I had known for years, and they didn't want any part of it. There were more calls, voicemails, messages from numbers I didn't recognize. I never listened to them. I didn't block them either. I just let the silence answer for me. I didn't need closure from them. I didn't need apologies that would come too late or only exist because they were uncomfortable. What I needed was distance. Space to rebuild what I had let them hollow out piece by piece. So I built it. I left my job at the company I'd been with for 7 years. I accepted an offer from a firm in Portland with a more human culture and a bigger focus on wellness. They offered me more flexibility and a role that allowed me to mentor junior developers. A part of the job I didn't realize I'd been craving until I had it. With the first bonus I earned, I booked a solo trip to Iceland. Just me, a rental car, and open roads I'd never seen before. I hiked across black sand beaches, stood beside waterfalls that roared so loud they silenced everything else, and watched the northern lights from a cabin so far off-grid that I couldn't get a signal for 3 days. It was the first time I truly felt alone in the best possible way. Back home I started picking up hobbies again. I enrolled in a pottery class, even though I'm terrible at it, and I started swimming in the mornings before work. I bought books I'd been meaning to read for years and I read them all the way through. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed. I started sleeping through the night. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't budgeting around someone else's emergencies. I wasn't walking on eggshells around guilt or manipulation. I wasn't a walking ATM. I wasn't a backup plan. I was just a woman living her life. Not for them. For me.